Council meeting is called to order.
Roll call for the City Council meeting of Wednesday, December 19th, 2018 at 8:30 p.m. Mrs. Arrington, Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon is on by phone. Please rise for a moment of silent meditation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledges of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of minutes from the meeting of December 5th, 2018, and bills for payment on December 13th and 20th, 2018. Ms. Arrington, Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon. We're going to go out of order tonight because of Mel being in recovery from knee surgery. So we're going to skip ahead to ordinances for final passage, and when that's complete, we'll go back and start with repository sales. Council File 16057, Official Ordinance Number 51, 2018, fixing the tax rate for all city purposes for the fiscal year 2019, beginning on January 1st, 2019, and ending on December 31st, 2019. The said levy for the debt service purposes of the City of Erie for the year 2019 is $3,549,601. By Mrs. Arrington and seconded by Mr. Winarski, that Council File Ordinance Bill Number 16057, and now known as Official File Ordinance Number 51 of 2018, be finally passed by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mirsky, Mr. Mirsky is no longer with us. Ms. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. City Council passed Official File Ordinance Number 51, 2018, finally by yeas 6, nays 0. Council File Number 16058, Official Ordinance Number 52, 2018, an ordinance of the City of Erie, County of Erie, and Commonwealth of Pennsylvania adopting the general fund and certain other budgets for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2019, and ending December 31st, 2019. The sum of $136,661,775 will be appropriated.
Madam President,
Yes.
I would like to speak. Okay. I am voting no on this, as I promised. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. I looked back at the story that broke in the middle of August when we found out that the Sewer Revenue Fund was short $1 million. And actually looked back at my quotes. At that time, I had suggested that we start immediately addressing the budget issues, and that's before we knew how big the deficit was going to be. Instead, we got the budget at we got the budget 2 weeks earlier than normal, but a lot of the proposals in there were then changed. So we did not attack the problem when we had the opportunity. I want to say that the newspaper is the gift that keeps on giving, and I'm saying that seriously. I was researching how City Council had previously approved people who had applied for City Council seats. And so I looked up in 2006, this was when Joe Sinnott became mayor, I think. And so somebody was being appointed to fill the City Council seat. And lo and behold, on the jump page, Council approves loan to Gulf Fund. Councilman Jim Thompson asked if the Gulf Fund had any revenues. The problem with the Gulf Fund goes back for more than a decade. I've brought that to the attention of the administration, and we've had no remedy yet. I believe it will be addressed in 2019, but it was not addressed. So this has been going on, as I've pointed out, for decades. As you know, I proposed a pay freeze for management employees, not because management isn't doing a good job, but because there are no performance reviews. Looking back at that story about the sewer revenue shortfall, some of you will recall that I had an exchange with the finance director, and I tried to find out why that number, that forecast, was so off. And I was told it was human error. And then I said, are there going to be consequences for that? And I was told, if you think I'm going to fire somebody, no. No consequences, no consequences. So the consequences for having no consequences for a misforecast led me to say the consequence for me is that I'm voting no on this budget. I know that we need to have additional revenue, but we didn't work hard enough to cut expenses. We didn't work hard enough to find additional sources of revenue. I hope that'll be remedied in 2019. Oh, my last point is that I worked really, really hard on these budget numbers. I consulted with a number of business people who had been involved in the Mayor's Advisory Group when the city was in huge financial trouble in 2006. And I got lots of, hey, you're on the right track, you're on the right track. We put a lot of those ideas on the table, and I don't think any of them were seriously looked at or adopted. So I know that I am not on the wrong track in trying to see how we resolve this going forward. The city has a structural deficit, and in 2019, the choices are going to be even harder than they were going forward to approve the budget for 2019. That's all.
Madam President,
Yes.
I want to agree with my colleague on some of her comments. I was a little disappointed. I thought we had a good chance this year to make an impression, but we didn't. We fell back again. This is not a condemnation of anybody in particular, but asking for a wage freeze at this time of year when that's the only thing we really controlled was not asking for too much. I voted against my own pay raise here because I didn't think it was the right thing to do, and I still don't think it's the right thing to do. When we ask people out there to pay for things that we're not willing to follow, I mean, in the military you learn to lead by example, and that means you do things that are unpleasant because they have to be done. I look back at this fallen year, and looking at next year by the administration's own prognosis, we got 5 years of tough decisions. And we're going to be sitting there next year doing the same thing, maybe a lot tougher. And where do we go next year? We're not going to have as many options. Somebody's going to get hurt again next year unless things change around here. I agree with the mayor. I hope things turn out great. But realistically, as an accountant, I can't plan on that. I have to plan on reality. Even at D-Day, Eisenhower had two messages, one if it worked out and one if it didn't. And going into next year, there's no guarantees we're going to get an influx of people or business coming in here. It'd be nice if we do, but I just think that when we had a chance to make some changes, to raise some fees, and what did we get? We got the crying from some segments of the community. They were being picked on, and nobody wanted to give, and next year it's going to be just as tough. Now I'm going to vote yes, and I'll tell you why. Because I think I was part of the process. I had something to do with it, and I think this is a team effort, and I applaud my colleague for voting no. That's her privilege. But I think that, the lessons I learned in the military are once a decision's made, you do it as a team, and I'm going to take blame for what's happened too. I'm not happy with this budget, and I'm telling you next year, the 32 things that we came up with that Ms. Allen marked down on that sheet, we will attack, and golf will be one of them. It's going to be a resolution to have a study done, and it's going to be up to council to decide where they want to do it. But I think now's the time. If Mill Creek can get 30,000 from their golf course, and we're satisfied getting 3 and 4, there's something wrong. So I'm not pleased, but that's my comments.
Are there any more comments?
Madam President, I'm going to vote yes to this budget, and I'll be honest with you, in my 9 years of doing budgets on council, this is one of the toughest, if not the toughest. When you're faced other years with a couple million deficit, that's one thing. Little here, little there. We are faced with an $11 million deficit this time around, and yes, some tough decisions were faced before us, brought before us by the administration on what they thought would be the best remedy for this deficit. We did have numerous sessions. We had a lot of great ideas with revenues, but with revenues that aren't going to work on this budget in particular. They're revenues or ideas that we can implement in 2019 that will help us with the 2020 budget. And be honest with you, yes, 32 great ideas. If we get half of them, if we get a third of them, if we get 5 of them, that's 5 more than what we had this year. Yes, golf will be an issue. It's not something we could have gotten an answer in the last month or two on whether it would be to sell them or to lease them. That has to be studied a little bit to see what is the best feasible thing for the city of Erie and its citizens. So with that being said, we did work with the administration. Would I have liked to seen a better cut in the earned income instead of 1.75 drop down to 1.65? Personally, I would have liked to seen it at 1.5. Understand though, by putting it at 1.50%, we'd have to dip into our reserves more. We did dip in our reserves some here, and by doing that, people got to realize our bond rating is set, and when we go to borrow money or people look at the city on their value, if we're borrowing from our reserves, we're not financially stable. So by keeping our bond rating at A stable, I believe, or we have to do some different aspects of how we can increase things. Now, the garbage fees were on the table for an increase. Those did go away. That doesn't mean there isn't going to be a garbage fee increase next year, but people got to realize it's been 5 years since we've had one of those, and it'll be 6 years next year. Sewer rate increase, we haven't had one of those for 5 years. Cost of doing business and costs money. So I was one that agreed to go with the sewer increase, but not the garbage increase, go with partial on the earned income increase, and I thought we came up with a collaborative solution here. Not everybody's winning, not everybody's losing. We're just trying to put something together at a $11 million deficit. So from this day we move forward and see what next year brings. But we did a lot of work, not at the budget session just for 2019, on what it's going to do for 2020. Thank you.
Madam President, I do have one additional comment to make just to help provide context about the Gulf Fund. I just checked my email, and I had asked, when I first noticed that expenses were exceeding revenue in the monthly finance reports we got on Gulf, I asked the finance director for information on those figures for the previous 5 years. I think he provided 10 years worth of figures. And that email was sent on August 16th, and I did bring it to the attention of my city council colleagues in August. So this was not something that I dropped on anybody when we got the budget in November. So there was a lot of time to think about what was going on with that golf fund. So I'm not anti-golf. I just did not like the fact that I could see with my non-accountant eyes that there was something wrong with those finances. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Okay, Rose, call for the vote.
By Mrs. Arrington, seconded by Mr. Winarski, the council file ordinance bill number 16058, and now known as official file ordinance number 52, 2018, be finally passed by the city council. Ms. Allen?
No.
Mr. Kwiatkowski? Mrs. Shaw? Mr. Winarski? Mr. Witherspoon? Mrs. Arrington? City Council passed official file ordinance number 52, 2018, finally by yeas 5, nays 1.
That takes us to repository sales. Is there anyone here for repository sales?
And then give them the sign it.
Is there anyone here for repository sales? Last call for repository sales.
Mel, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Are you hanging on, or are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Okay, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, and I want to thank everyone, especially our citizens, for hanging in there with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel.
Bye.
Bye.
Now we'll call citizens to be heard.
Good evening, Council. My name is Randy Barnes, 109 Walton Point, Erie, Pennsylvania. I've been on record for probably the last 8 years criticizing council for borrowing money, and you're going to do it again. You're in this mistake and this problem because you've been borrowing money that you can't afford to pay back. Last summer, July of 2017, you did a $10 million bond. That's $10 million you didn't have. You borrowed $10 million. You didn't have it. Now this year, you're talking about borrowing more money going forward. Don't you understand that borrowing money and being in debt isn't the way to prosperity? You're just digging the hole deeper. Eventually, we're going to be in China. In fact, the mayor, if he wants to go to China, just keep digging this hole deeper because he's going to end up in China because you're not going to get out of it by borrowing money. You can't afford to make your payment now, but you're going to borrow more money on the hope that more people will move in the city. I have heard that at least 20 times from the mayor. He won't stand here when I'm speaking, but on the hope people will move in. You know what kind of financial, well, you know what that is? That's the same as when the people walk in the casino. They hope they win the money. I got a suggestion. Whenever the Powerball's over 50 million, let the city buy 1,000 tickets, because someone's going to win. And you just might hope that the city wins that money. You know, this all starts with the king of bonds. You don't know that, do you? But Mr. Schember back in December of 2010 said that issuing bonds to fully fund the city's 3 pension funds, he said.
Excuse me.
This is from the Times News. I'm
Excuse
quoting
me.
an article from the Times News.
But you can't use any names.
I'm quoting the article from the Times News. Schember pledged to start working with the administration and the rest of council. Issuing bonds to more fully fund the city's 3 pension funds, he said. The more fully funded those pensions are, the lower city's annual minimum municipal obligation would be. Well, yeah, you take it out of one pocket, but you got a hole in the other pocket. What are we doing here? So he went on to say, and now is the good time to issue bonds. That was in 2010. You know, to the hometown banker, it's always a good time to lend money. Shake hands, how much can you afford? We'll lend you as much as you can afford, or even more. Reserves. You don't have reserves. It's phony. It's a phony reserve account. When you owe millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars and you're going to borrow more, how can you say you have a reserve account? If that's how you do it, let's all go to the bank tomorrow and borrow $500,000 so we can have a reserve account. Because we should be able to do that. We should have a reserve account. Give me a break. More bonds, more bonds. More bonds, more debt. Don't call them bonds, call them loans. It confuses people. They're loans. You're borrowing money because you can't afford to provide the citizens the services they deserve. You're already in Act 47, you just don't know it. You're just putting off the inevitable. Putting off the inevitable. You want to read another quote? I want to read a quote from the paper. This is when the then city councilman quit. Went on to brag, but during that time, we moved from the brink of insolvency, an 11 million structural deficit, that was back when the mayor quit, general fund, to the verge of a financial stability with 5 million reserve. He was proud of that. He and your financial guy and the last mayor, they all kind of organized this back in 10, 12, 13, 14. Borrow money, don't pay now, pay later. Balloon payments, buy now, pay later. It's a joke. If you ran your own household like you're running the city, you'd be on the street. Because a mortgage company would come kick you out. You'd say, oh, can I borrow some more money? They'd say, no, you borrowed money last year. No pay cuts in city? These people deserve a raise, but when there's no money, how can you give a pay raise? Council should be taking a pay cut. Every at-will employee, including the mayor, any elected official should be taking a pay cut. And the council should stand up and say, I'm taking a 10% pay cut tonight for the next year. The mayor ought to take a 50% pay cut. If you remember back when the mayor's salary went from $65,000 to $90,000, who was the guy that seconded the motion? Councilman Schember, the quitter. He seconded the motion to raise the mayor's salary to $90,000. You know what the reason was? We'll get better qualified candidates. If an $11 million deficit today is a sign of a better candidate, then you better raise the salary to $1 million, because you didn't get your money's worth. You got a guy that got elected, walked around the city asking people, what should I do? I thought he knew what he was doing. That's why we voted for him. He didn't know what he's doing. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Joe Mitchell. I live on 7th Estate, and I have a concern. I use a scooter to get around Erie. I pretty much go from like 3rd up to 12th, from French over to Sass. That's kind of like my little territory. I had a house in Mill Creek, and I moved to Erie to be easier for me. And it is. It's quite a bit easier for me. But my concern is in the winter, with the streets when it snows, you can't get from the curb onto the sidewalk, from the street to the curb to get to the stores. Like in November when we had that snow, you know, it was almost impossible. I had to go down and get my prescription, and that was on a Friday, and no one shoveled the walkways out from the street to the curb until Monday morning. And I was watching, because I live in the Boston store. I live on the 3rd floor, right in the corner of State. And I look down, I see the guy from the streets department, which is doing a good job. But now the snow from the plows is hard and crusty, and he had a heck of a time shoveling that off of the curbs. And I noticed, you know, you don't realize how many people are handicapped until you are one, and you drive around in a scooter and a wheelchair. There's tons of people that live down here that have handicaps that depend on these. And I'm just asking if you guys can do a little bit better job keeping those ways open for us, because it's almost impossible. And especially for me, like I said, I'm on a 3-wheel scooter. It's easy for this thing to tip over. And if I tip over, I'm screwed, because I can't walk that far. And that's just my concern, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm not cutting. Freda asked me to go in front of her. Good evening, everybody. Merry Christmas and happy holidays for those that don't celebrate Christmas. My name's Adam Trott. I'm 531 West 6th Street, 2nd floor, and there's a few items I wanted to shed some light on. First off, I guess the obvious one, which is the McBride Viaduct. There's a thought out there, well, geez, the bridge is coming down, so there's no case, right? And the fact is, the case is on process, and the city removes the viaduct at their own risk. If the violations that we strongly believe occurred during the process are found to be accurate, and the demolition team is at fault, violating civil rights and process procedure, then the city's at risk. They have to restore the harm that they did. The other misunderstanding about the viaduct is when it's down, it's not over, it's just beginning for all the people that you've made their life worse. So, I know City Hall sells a certain spin on all this, but the substantive issues are very different. And in light of that topic, I did want to hand out the field scoping view minutes from October 13th, 2010. I've highlighted some things that I want to make sure we don't forget, which is part of why we're on this advocacy. One is that the whole approach to the project was that it was a bridge on the rehabilitation/replacement list. For all these years, there was no talk about demolition. It was about how do we fix the bridge. Now, these comments were minutes taken on October 13th, 2010. It was always a bridge rehabilitation project. And I think it's important to note there's a few items, statements made in these minutes that shows what the intent of evaluating the bridge was for, and then there's no explanation for why these intents were discarded or contradicted later. Particularly, I'd like to point out that on the third page, there's a highlighted section that explicitly says, pedestrians are crossing the East Side Access Highway south of Buffalo Road. This is a separate issue and is not related to the McBride Viaduct Bridge. They made that very clear statement that the stuff happening south of the viaduct was never relative to the viaduct issue. And then once the spin got going to sell the demolition job, you'll notice they kept saying, even the most recent Erie Times articles keep saying, viaduct demolition part of the Buffalo Road intersection upgrade. They keep talking about that, and they keep talking about the fences they're putting south of the viaduct they call pedestrian improvements, which they never were. They were containment walls meant to fragment a neighborhood further and cut them off from their other neighbors to make life more difficult to interact with your neighborhood surroundings. This is pretty obvious stuff. They also acknowledge in the scoping field view minutes that the Save the Bridge group got approximately 10,000 signatures on their petition to save the bridge. Now, I'm hoping that City Council and City Hall can start to understand that when you have something like that submitted and it is completely dismissed, you have pretty much obliterated the hope of that part of the community. You can imagine what it must feel like. You can imagine why Father Priscero had put so much into it. He was able to achieve a petition of over 10,000 signatures, and then City Hall just pretty much ripped it up in front of him and said, these people don't matter. Can you imagine that? And finally, I can't believe that's already 5 minutes, but finally, I do want to point out that those field scoping view minutes, in an email from Federal Highway Administration to PennDOT On August 8th, 2013, the Federal Highway Administration explained what the purpose and need function is. It's to define the problem, not the solution. And the Federal Highway advised PennDOT that these field scoping minutes were out of order because they designated the alternatives to be studied. That was not supposed to happen till after investigative work. So those are the kinds of process flaws. There's a ton of them. That's one of them, and that's why we're on this appeal. We need to fix this, and the Bayfront Parkway is the next big item after we heal the viaduct. Thank you.
My name's Freda Tepfer. I'm a certified orientation and mobility specialist. I live at 1738 West 23rd Street in Erie. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Jones. I'm happy that he will be back on the podium. I do hope that if there are invocations, that we don't make them such that anybody who's not a Christian feels uncomfortable with them. But I do want to urge the city council members, specific ones from last night, to view public involvement, to view public participation, to view legal participation in a meeting as a good thing, and not as an imposition, and not as something to be avoided and circumvented. I won't say any more about that. I think people know what I'm talking about. I want to, I'm sorry that you have raised the earned income tax, and it's not too late for you to decide to impose a business fee. I think that is a mistake that was left out of the budget. There should be a business fee of $100 on a certain level of business. There are plenty of businesses in this city that can pay $100 a year. And it's to ensure that there's more equality in the city of contribution, but also because, and I will give you some reasons later on, these businesses make it necessary for the city staff to interact with them, and they should carry their weight. I am dismayed that the mayor doesn't have the courtesy to be here for the public comments. He felt it was important for him to be interviewed on the cameras. He could do that later, but he's not here for the comments. I think that's an insult to the citizens. I want to bring up an article that appeared in the New York Times on December 12th called "The Pedestrian Strikes Back," where it talks about how it's begun to dawn on public officials that walking is a highly efficient means of transit, as well as a great underrated pleasure in life. Car owners are furious because their century-long domination over pedestrians for a right rather than a privilege. Cities are not doing nearly enough to restore streets for pedestrian use. Many American cities still rely on level of service design models developed in the 60s that focus single-mindedly on keeping vehicle traffic moving. This is important actually for a couple of reasons. The viaduct study just spent pages and pages and pages and pages addressing level of service. They gave very little attention to the needs of pedestrians. The school district, when I called them when the viaduct was gated, said that they knew that the crossing at 12th and the Bayfront connector was unsafe. Because of that, they had issued bus passes to any students who lived in the area that they could no longer use the viaduct. They issued them bus passes. So they knew that that was an unsafe crossing. But a bus pass doesn't help a student who wants to go somewhere on Saturday. It doesn't help a person with a physical or an intellectual mobility challenge. It doesn't help somebody who has a kid on either arm and a bag of groceries. The city, we have a mayor in the city who said that he had no issue with safety because he ran across the street. but the school district determined that that's an unsafe crossing. We have degraded the mobility for students and others the rest of the time when the school buses are not available. One of the reasons, as I said, that there should be a business fee is because there's a concern with the enforcement of parking and sidewalk regulations. As you will hear, there are businesses where cars regularly park and block the sidewalk. There are numerous businesses in this town that plow their parking lots and leave huge berms across the sidewalk. I've been struggling with the city to get them to address this. Every time businesses do something like this, it costs staff time. There should be a fee. Wow, I didn't get to half of what I wanted to say. Anyway, I wish everybody a Happy New Year. Please regard our involvement as an attribute, not as something to be avoided, circumvented, or resented. Thank you. Here's the podium,
Okay.
and the mic is right there.
All right, got it. Okay, I'm Shelley Rhodes, a new taxpayer in the city. I just purchased my first house in August. I am also blind. I've also worked in the city now for over 10 years. And as a new homeowner, I've discovered one very not so pleasant thing. And that is, I have a very hard time getting to work and getting home from work, especially now that the weather has gotten worse and that we have this lovely white snowy stuff we call snow. My concern is that oftentimes when businesses plow their driveways and parking lots, they tend to pile the snow in a quote-unquote convenient spot. The downside is that convenient spot is where I need to walk. I have had several discussions with a couple of businesses in my neighborhood pertaining to this situation. It's not that I can step over them. I can. The problem is that my guide dog considers a wall of snow as a wall. It is not something to be broached over. It is a wall. So when I attempt to go down a sidewalk and there are two walls on one side and on the other, and then there is a wall in front of us, that becomes a dead end. And unfortunately, getting disoriented after 5 o'clock when it's dark out and there aren't people around, and attempting to figure out how to get out of a dead end is not something that I've really enjoyed doing. I have now been disoriented several times. We have contacted the businesses. The businesses are famous for parking cars on the sidewalk, as well as plowing their snow and leaving it on the sidewalk. I take care of my own sidewalk. I shovel it myself. So I know that it does require some work. But I am the first one to say that I will take care of my sidewalk and make sure it is okay. I wish that businesses were encouraged, actually reminded, that they are supposed to do the same thing. They have the finances to do it. If they're plowing their parking lots, they should also be caring for the sidewalks as well. And that is what I have to say on that situation. The other comment I would like to bring up is something that our government, I work for the state, is looking into, and city may want to think about it. It is a project called LEAN. It's L-E-A-N. It doesn't stand for anything. We think it should stand for something since we're government and you should have some sort of acronym. But it's about finding and identifying waste and trimming it from different departments. That doesn't mean trimming staff, but it means becoming more efficient in how you do things. Even tiny little things, such as instead of calling or having a meeting, send an email. It might be something worth checking into or considering, especially as, unfortunately, our tax base is probably not going to increase. I have a feeling it might decrease. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Barry Koppel, 1957 West 30th Street, lifetime member of the city and taxpayer. What I wanted to do here tonight was, it's probably not going to help out with the 28 or 19 budget, but maybe moving forward, just a couple of ideas that council has always been, through these budget sessions, asking for help and ideas and whatnot. And I may be all wet on all of these ideas, maybe they've already been looked at, but I thought it was enough to come down here today and throw these out to you. And hopefully they can be either brought up by the administration or brought up by council or together. But I think these are things that should be, should be being asked. First off, we just had this actually where I work, but how often does the city put out to bid its health insurance? We just did that where I work. Fortunately, we have a program. Unfortunately, because of the fact that we did change this year, because it was a large savings to us, I now have to go out and get all new doctors because the insurance that we went to does not is not accepted by my doctors. But there's one item to go out and look at it. Can we bid this out on a regular basis? Maybe not obviously not yearly, but every few years. With the city this size and the employees, I think you could be looking at tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings. Secondly, recycling. I know we have an ordinance in the city about recycling, but just in my area where I live and in areas that I've traveled through on garbage nights, my guess would be that there's probably a 30 to 40% non-compliance of people just throwing everything into garbage bags and not doing any type of recycling whatsoever. So my thought was, why can't we put some sort of teeth into this where we actually make it we mandate recycling, and if you don't, you'll be fined. And this can be attached to the garbage and water bill so that if people think they're just going to not pay it, they're going to get their water shut off like we are doing now with the garbage. This is not to hurt people. This is to get people to get more environmentally friendly and helping to bring less garbage to the dump site where we're having to pay for that. So right off the bat, you may have items that are people that are being fined and you're collecting this money, but obviously over time that would inevitably come down because people would start complying. However, when they start doing more complying, that's less trash that you're taking to the waste management, and the tonnage that we pay would go down, so we hopefully would have some savings there. Another item that I think this is probably the biggest of all of them, and I know it's been talked about, and it's been in the media, people have talked about it on council. We're looking at about $3.5 million of unpaid parking tickets, and that's mind-boggling when you think about it. And just in the last 10 to 12 years, I'm hearing that there's 16,000 boot-eligible vehicles. You have one person that drives around from 7 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday through Friday, trying to find people to put a boot on their car. This is insane. My idea, and again, maybe it can or can't be, the solicitor may have to look into this, but it is a motor vehicle issue. Why can't we go to the district justice level, put a lien on that vehicle through the county, and then they are not allowed to redo their license or registration of that vehicle until that's paid, plus all of the costs that it cost us to go to the district justice and to the county. I did this personally 15 years ago when I had a little incident with somebody hitting my car that lived in Pittsburgh, and okay, I got a judgment, but have fun collecting it. Well, I found out that I was able to go down to the county and get this, bring my judgment, have a filing fee paid, and put a lien on this person's vehicle. Guess what? About 9 months later, I got a phone call from someone in Pittsburgh saying, I can't renew my driver's license and my registration because I have this lien, and I need you to go to the county courthouse and sign off on this. And I said, I'll do it when I get around to it. I eventually did. But this is a great way to be able to go out and collect this money rather than trying to run around and find cars to put boots on with one person doing that. And then the last item was a safety committee. I don't know if the city has a safety committee. I happen to be the chairperson of a 13-member board safety committee for where I work. And through the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry, if you have a certified safety committee, you're eligible for a 5% discount on your workman's comp liability insurance, which could be a great savings to the city, as well as having a safe environment for your workers, less injuries, less time off. Those are my items. I hope that I made some sense here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I live at 513 Peach. I love this city, but I swear nobody knows how to run it. I went and got my graduate diploma at the University of Cincinnati in urban planning. I moved back to Erie. I want to help, but nobody apparently wants help, and you people have it all figured out. As we can see, that hasn't happened. I'd like to talk about how the city has not taken a risk in approximately 6 decades. You have a $11 million deficit. The city's poverty rate is 30%. Why don't you take a risk? Institute a new fee, albeit a fire fee, a sidewalk maintenance fee. You have a garbage authority, a lighting authority. How about you buy the old Central Mall, demolish it, remediate it, sell off the parcels for it to be developed. You get tax revenue, you get people to move in. This city has not taken a risk. You've done the Transitway Mall in the 70s. That's an old urban planning disaster. We know how that went. It failed miserably. Nobody came down here. I feel like the city is still stuck in that time. It's still car-oriented. No one gives a damn. Can someone please do something? I read in the paper today about Erie's failures. I feel like everybody is still stuck on those failures. They haven't gone through them, learned from them, and moved on. You've had the failures of not getting jobs, the Toyota plant, the Ford plant. You've had that waste-to-energy plant, which was voted down, or didn't happen. You've had the inland port, thanks to Harbor Creek, that's not gonna happen either. Can someone still take a risk? Can someone be a leader? I feel like there is no leadership in this building. I'm not blaming anybody here, but can someone step up, make the decisions, and do it right? This city may not be good for the next 5 years. It'll probably be at 47, like that guy previously said. I'm sure you heard that Pittsburgh finally got out of it after about 2.5 decades. They have a leader as their mayor, and they have leadership as in some companies, UPMC, Highmark, PNC, that are doing things. I'm sure Erie Insurance is doing it, UPMC is doing it, but I feel like they have taken on too much, and it's time for the city to step up and do its part. You can create new authorities, you can reorganize the government to make it work, you can, I don't know, actually talk to the people and learn from them. I'm sure that's happening, but I am not seeing it. I left with my parents, they come back, they are disappointed in how the city looks. They say it looks like crap. The house I lived in doesn't look good. The neighborhood has, I don't know, a house that was a meth lab in it. Can someone tear that down? Or is that never gonna happen either? Can someone please just take that risk, be a leader, and do something? The city is probably going to wither on a vine and die. Will it? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. And there's also two last things. I'd like to thank the person I met with last week, because I learned a lot from them, about the city and how it functions. And also the last thing is, if anybody wants a map of city neighborhoods, there are 39. This is one of the projects I did to hopefully fix the city and make it better. If someone wants to learn, talk to me, talk to other people that are here. Thank you.
Good evening, Erie elected officials and residents. I'm Lisa Austin, 1262 West 9th Street. All of the plans that the city and the county have been paying for boil down to basically two things: making our community more walkable, accessible, and investing in existing assets. If you go all the way back even to Charles Nolan's 1913 plan, you'll see that the tenets of his suggestions were along the lines of making the public spaces accessible to people and welcoming to people that were old and young and rich and poor. And now the idea of ability and disability are also part of that mix. In other words, to get a thriving city, you have to make it welcoming for everyone. But unfortunately, we have decisions that are being made by people who don't understand this over and over again. We've talked to you endlessly about the viaduct and how that's a key artery, a walkable artery. You've had Joel Duderman just write an op-ed piece, a very renowned local businessman, about how this is the visionary thing to do to reinvest in this bridge. And now we're also faced with another set of terrible ideas that have been just put forward by PennDOT to build a 4-lane highway along the waterfront to speed the 80% of traffic that wants to go through the city without stopping. Both of these ideas, tearing down the viaduct and building this highway, are the opposite of the tenets of all of these plans. I would add that the tearing down of the McAllister building is another blow against walkability because it removes something beautiful to walk by. Yes, it's run down, but it has a majesty that could be reinvented with some effort. These, I would call really foolish ideas, short-sighted ideas, misinformed ideas, are one of a long list of things that we've witnessed. The closing of Division Street by the Port Authority, by the Planning Authority, that isolated neighborhoods and children that need to get to Piper Burley. The removal of the buses from State Street, again, a bad idea, anti-walkable, separating the connections. The new and aggressive quality of life ticketing, this is not necessarily against walkability, but it becomes an issue against those that are in financial trouble in the city already, along with the recent doubling of parking tickets. I want to ask you, who gets a parking ticket? Most people that are wealthy don't park on the street. It's the people living in the inner city who don't have off-street parking that are getting these tickets. And it's $30. That's like, half a day's pay for some people. I wanted to point out that I think that these are structural issues that have to change by changing the way we do business, and part of that starts with you. City Council, I know that you all are trying very hard, but we don't have representation from the entire city. We need to change this at-large sort of popularity contest and move into a ward-based structure, something where right now there's nobody on council who lives around the viaduct. And so we've got to have that kind of a shift. That's not something that can be done easily. I know it involves the state level kinds of changes, but I ask that you would look into that and to see that we can, in the future at some point, have actual neighborhood representation. I wanted to comment that about the letter that was in the paper, pointing out the massively huge pieces of equipment that have been rumbling up and down on the viaduct, and they're very heavy, and they really point out the reality of this, points out the inaccuracy of the engineering report that was delivered to City Council and to Erie CPR back in February that said the ability for the viaduct to allow any public safety vehicles or any kind of things on the viaduct is, quote, non-existent. This was in the report. If it's non-existent, then why are these gigantic cranes not crushing this crumbling viaduct? It wasn't crumbling. They made it crumble. I go back to what the council was saying earlier today, human error. I heard Councilwoman talk about it. And I think that there's been human error in all of these decisions, and I would ask that there are consequences for these bad decisions and that things change. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is McDonald. My property is 19th and Reed. We're going to miss that viaduct. I don't even see why it had to come down. They have put enough money into it, looking at it, that they could have made the repairs or just about built another viaduct. I just don't understand, y'all. Some of you voted to tear it down, and some of you didn't want it tore down. I don't think it should have been torn down. It wasn't bothering nobody if they wasn't doing nothing but walking over it. Those kids need a way to go to school down through there. Walking over on that expressway over there, the Bayfront Parkway, that's dangerous. When them kids cross that street up there, I hope somebody's going to get killed over there crossing that street, because there's a lot of traffic. And, you know, kids are kids. They'll be running out there. That viaduct shouldn't have never been torn down. It's going to come back to haunt you one day, you that voted to tear it down. I wish it hadn't have happened. We spent a lot of time trying to save that viaduct, but it didn't do no good. I just hate to think about somebody's kid getting killed over there, but eventually a car gonna run over one of those kids, because those kids, they don't know nothing about all that traffic. They shouldn't have to be out there in that traffic. They should still have that viaduct to walk over. You know what I can't understand? That armory down there. It is not down there for the peoples no more. It's down there for Erie Insurance Exchange. That armory shouldn't have never been sold. That armory should be there for the peoples that live down on the Lower East Side. But somebody figured out the way to make a few dollars, I guess. Somebody got paid. And then there was that other Crawley Auditorium over there on 5th Street, I think, between 5th and 6th. They tore that down. They're going to change the name of this town to Erie Insurance Exchange after a while, because Erie Insurance and these hospitals, they're buying up everything. I see that tire place down there, they done gone out. They done closed up. I guess Erie Insurance bought them too. You know, some of you don't have foresight. You don't have no vision for the city. You're just sitting up there. I'm sorry for you. You're not just sitting up there to say, I'm on city council and we spent this kind of money and that kind of money. That hole that you all done got us into, it don't make sense to me. I see this park out here, you're steady putting money in that park. That park was all right before you did anything to it. That park was all right. You done put a lot of $1 million out there. Now, you're in the hole. You're not in the hole, we're in the hole. Because you're going to milk us like you milk a cow. And it don't make sense. It's going to come back to haunt you one of these days, though. I promise you that. All of them. Hey, there are peoples out there that don't know where they're going to get their next meal at. And you're steady putting taxes on us. How did we get up to that big figure? It's not the taxpayers' problem, but you will put that problem on our backs. That ain't all I got to say, but Lord help y'all. Thank you for your time.
Are there any more citizens to be heard?
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank City Council for the opportunity to submit my information for consideration for City Council. I do want you to know that your process was not fair and complete. And it wasn't fair in that everyone was not given the same opportunity with the same 3 questions to answer those questions the way that maybe they would have wanted to. And I think that is critical. I do want to congratulate Mr. Jones on his appointment, but you need to know that the process was flawed. And the citizens need to know that the process was flawed. It may have went the way that you wanted to go, but the process was flawed. Again, my concern is that you govern the entire city, not just what you want to govern. There is no reason why, I don't know, the mayor, I keep hearing the mayor say that he comes to the east side. And maybe he does, I can't say he doesn't. I'm at work when he's out, I guess. But I've not seen him, and I've not had anyone inquire about the concerns of the east side areas that I reside in. I don't know who approved the garbage people to take up a whole neighborhood that was houses. You have people living next to waste. That is not acceptable. But you got a plan. And what you should really do is just put the plan out there. Let's be real. Let's be honest. You've already said that nobody wants to live over there with those people. So you must have a plan for the people who live there. Tell us what the plan is. Then I can make a better decision. If you can put money in this park right here, there's no reason for you to put money in Burton Park, McKinley Park. Come on. Have you seen the children trying to cross the street at the Bayfront Connector? It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And somebody's child is going to be killed, and it's going to be on you, and you. Shame on you. The day that you all put that fence up, I gave kids rides home because they didn't know how to get from their school home without walking over that bridge. Excuse my language right now, but that's piss poor planning on your part. That wasn't right. It's not acceptable. And it needs to get better. I believe you can get better, but you gotta want to be better. And if you all go inside, take a hard look at what you're doing. Don't just do it for your neighbor and your neighbor, do it for everybody. Share the wealth. It's not too much to ask. Not too much to ask at all. Share the wealth, be fair, hire people of all races, creeds, and color. Everybody's mind thinks, works, not just one race of people. You got to open yourselves up. No one's going to come to Erie as long as you keep doing what you're doing. We're going to pack our bags and leave. And we're going to tell people behind us to come too. That's not what you want. But you got to get better at governing what you've been charged to govern. We've entrusted this to you. And all you keep doing is hitting our pockets and not giving anything. You don't give grants for home improvements. You don't give grants for sidewalk improvements. Everything is take, take, take. Try giving sometimes and see what happens.
Are there any more citizens to be heard? Are there any more citizens to be heard? Last call for citizens to be heard. That takes us to ordinance for first reading.
Council File Number 16060, an ordinance amending the codified ordinance of the City of Erie, Part 9, Utilities and Public Service Code, Title 5, Sewers and Water, Article 933, Sewer Rental, Section 93302A, sewer rates by increasing the meter quantity charge per 100 cubic feet per quarter for the first 70 cubic feet from $2.65 to $3.05, and the next 4,930 cubic feet from $2.52 to $2.90, and usage over 5,000 cubic feet from $2.38 to $2.74, and by increasing the large volume user charges per 100 cubic feet per month for the first 23 cubic feet from $2.65 to $3.05, and the next 1,644 cubic feet from $2.52 to $2.90, and all other usage over 1,667 cubic feet from $2.38 to $2.74. By Mrs. Arrington and seconded by Mr. Winarski, the council file ordinance number 16060, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mrs. Arrington. City Council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16060 by yeas 5, nays 0 on first reading. Council file 16061, an ordinance amending the codified ordinance for the City of Erie, Part 3, Business and Taxation Code, Article 371, Earned Income Tax, subsection 37102D, by increasing the earned income tax for residents of the City of Erie from 1 1/18% to 1 7/7500%. That should be to 1 65/100%. By Mrs. Arrington and seconded by Mr. Winarski, the council file ordinance number 16061, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the City Council. Ms. Allen?
No.
Mr. Kwiatkowski?
Madam President, I want to make a brief comment. This is a tax that I wish I didn't have to vote yes on, because I think it's very repressive. I hope we follow through with our promise that we're going to find a way to extend this tax to all people who earn income in the City of Erie, not just those who reside here. For those that have faith in the city, who live here and who work here, this is an undue hardship. Many of the people that earn a living both off government and the private sector live outside the city, and this is another tax to force some of our citizens to think about maybe moving. Things got to change, because if we can't, for those that earn a good living in the city that don't reside here, we get no income tax, we get no real estate tax, and we get no purchasing power. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? You can continue, Rose.
Mr. Kwiatkowski? Mrs. Schaaf? Mr. Winarski? Mrs. Arrington? City Council pass official file ordinance number 16061 finally by yeas 5, nays 0 on first reading. Council File 16063, an ordinance appropriating the sum of $28,000 from unappropriated and anticipated revenue to be received from the Erie County Gaming Revenue Authority and $11,000 to be received from Mill Creek Township for a total of $39,000 to carry out the multi-municipal collaboration project for the National Development Council, the NDC, will provide community and economic development training through a 4-day seminar as well as remote training and certifications of municipal and township staff members. By Mr. Kwiatkowski and seconded by Ms. Allen, that Council File Ordinance Number 16063, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Ms. Shaw, Mr. Winarski, Mrs. Arrington. City Council read and adopt Council File Ordinance Number 16063 by yeas 5, nays 0, on first reading. That'll take us into new business.
Madam President,
Yes.
vote to move the balance of the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Are there any separations?
Yes, I'd like to separate number 2.
Under what, Liz?
Number 2 under new business, Liz?
Number 2 under new business, yes.
Okay. No other separations? Okay, moving the balance of the agenda. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mrs. Arrington.
Yeah.
Resolution by Mr. Winarski and seconded by Mr. Kwiatkowski, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that Mr. Richard Wagner, 4228 State Street, Erie, is appointed to the Erie Airport Authority for his first term, which will expire on December 31st, 2023. Mr. Wagner replaces board member Mr. Naaman McWilliams, whose second term has expired. Discussion?
Madam President, I'm voting against the nomination of Richard Wagner to serve on the Airport Authority for several reasons. This is not personal. Mr. Wagner and I have had some great conversations, actually some long conversations, when he called me at home about the city budget. He has some good ideas on how to tackle our structural deficit. I'm voting against this because, first, there was no attempt to seek out applicants for the Airport Authority, as Kathy Schaaf and I have done for other open positions. Second, Mr. Wagner is already serving on the Water Authority until 2023. And third, judging by the number of applicants for the open city council seat, there are many Erie citizens willing to do public service. I've also mentioned that the Young Erie Professionals, the president had an op-ed in the paper a couple of weeks ago talking about how members of that group are willing to get engaged, and others could have been invited to serve on the Airport Authority. They were not. Appointments to municipal boards and authorities should be made with several criteria in mind. Volunteers should be sought to reflect the diversity of our community. They should also add skills that are necessary to create an effective board. I hope to be able to persuade my council colleagues to change the appointment process for 2019. We have gone over this and over this and over this. I am the liaison to the Sewer Authority. In the short time that I've been on council, since I was sworn in January, 3 new people have been added to the Sewer Authority by city council appointment. I had no input in that, and yet I'm the one who goes to the meetings every month. I'm the one who organized the study session about the bond issue for the wastewater treatment plant. The appointment process is For lack of a better word, it's screwed up. Thank you.
Are there any more comments?
Go ahead, Ms. Shaw. Once again, it's not the first appointment I've had, and I'm appointing somebody who I think can really be a benefit to the airport authority. Sure, he's on the water authority, nothing wrong with that. Just because people aren't happy with the way appointments are made doesn't mean people aren't happy the way the budget is done. People aren't happy the way our raises are done. I get all that, but I'm sticking with the appointment I went with. Mr. Wagner, I believe, is a more than comparable individual to do the job. Thank you.
Anybody else?
All right, roll call. Ms. Allen?
No.
Mr. Kwiatkowski? Mrs. Shaw? Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mrs. Arrington? This resolution will pass 4-1. We do have a couple of waive rules, Madam President. First waive rules is an agreement between the City of Erie and Donald Wagner, who is the legal counsel, to provide the legal counsel for the zoning hearing board. This was kind of lost. It was supposed to be on an agenda a couple of meetings ago, but was found, and that's the waive rules. Voting on the waive rules, Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Winarski, Mrs. Arrington. By Ms. Allen, second by Mr. Winarski, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that the proper city officials are hereby authorized to enter into an agreement between the City of Erie and Attorney Donald Wagner to provide legal counsel to the zoning hearing board of the City of Erie at the rate of $120 per hour. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Shaw, Mr. Winarski, Mrs. Arrington. And this resolution will pass 5-0. The second wave rules is the appointment of Curtis Jones to replace Councilman Mirsky. And then after this, Madam President, we're going to swear Mr. Jones in.
Okay.
So voting on the waive rules, Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Shaw, Mr. Winarski, Mrs. Arrington. By Mrs. Arrington, second by Mr. Winarski, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that Mr. Curtis Jones, 2204 Plum Street, Erie, is appointed city councilman to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Mr. Robert Mirsky, with a term expiring on January 6, 2020.
Madam President, I have something to say before I vote yes for Curtis Jones. I've had a lot to say tonight. One of the reasons I decided to run for city council is because I attended the Women's March on January 21st, 2017 in Washington, D.C., in which at least 500,000 participants, probably more, chanted, "This is what democracy looks like." I wanted to be part of changing our country at the local level. The procedure that City Council chose to follow to fill the council seat left vacant by the election of Bob Mirsky to the House of Representatives is not what democracy looks like. We advertised the vacancy and 51 people interested in being public servants responded. City Council whittled the applicant list to 20 candidates who were interviewed in a public meeting at my suggestion and my insistence. But when we went to cast a series of ballots to further narrow the pool of candidates, I learned that the rules had been changed. Instead of being able to vote for up to 6 candidates, as we had been instructed in an email on November 7th, we were told we could cast all 6 of our votes for 1 candidate. At a time when so many citizens are being denied the right to cast 1 vote per person due to voter suppression, City Council flouted the conventions of democracy and allowed council members to cast up to 6 votes for one candidate. That would be like walking into the voting booth on November 7th, 2017, when the last municipal election was held, and there were 4 Democrats, including me, and 1 Republican on the ballot for 4 open city council seats, and being allowed to cast as many as 4 votes for a single candidate. That is now not how voting is supposed to work for public office. We do not stuff the ballot box. I'm going to vote for Curtis tonight. I look forward to working with him. I've admired the way he brings collaboration and good ideas to City Council, but I object to the process used to fill this seat, and I'm searching for solutions to make sure that such a process doesn't occur again. I want to thank all 51 candidates who sent letters of interest and resumes. I thank the 20 candidates who were invited to answer three questions by email, and I thank the 18 candidates who sat for interviews with City Council before we made our choices last night. I read every application and resume. I read the answers to the emailed questions twice. I then went back and reread the original applications and resumes for the finalists. Based on those materials and the in-person interviews, I readjusted my list of 6 candidates I intended to vote for in the first round, only to learn that the process had changed. I've thought a lot about how to proceed in trying to move Erie City Council forward to be open and transparent in all matters. The only way to do this is to seek out a leadership position on council. City Councilman Jim Winarski has announced that he is running for City Council President for 2019. I do not intend to challenge him. However, I'm happy to announce tonight that I will be running for City Council President in 2020. I have a 10-point platform which I will share with anyone who is interested, and I will adjust that platform over the course of 2019 so it is timely and relevant. Thank you.
Roll call. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mrs. Arrington. This resolution will pass 5-0. Curtis, do you want to come on up? Who's swearing in? Okay, Mr. Jones Senior, you can come up, and who's going to hold the Bible for you?
My mother.
All right, wonderful. I didn't get a mic out, so.
You're pretty full.
Okay, it will stand there. And we're good. And I'm going to need you to sign this when we're done. Hi.
I love it.
Wherever you feel comfortable, go right ahead.
Do solemnly affirm
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
and I will discharge the duties of my office
as Erie City Councilman
as Erie City Councilman
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
You want to say something? Grab a mic.
She said, "Do you want to say something? Grab the mic."
5 minutes.
3 and lower. Yes, ma'am. To everyone, good evening to everyone that's here, Mr. Mayor, Solicitor, Council, my good, wonderful friend, the Controller. I'm honored to be selected by this body, who I have great respect for, and have served with many of you, and look forward to serving with all of you in 2019. The biggest issue, or the biggest thing that I want to bring to the table is not economics, is not just finance, is not just what are we going to do with buildings and brick and mortar. All those things are wonderful, but if we have people that are poor in spirit and have no hope and don't see that the investments we're making have a direct correlation to their future and their children and their lives as well, then we've kind of wasted a lot of opportunity. And so not alone will I do all the brick and mortar work and working with the administration and working with everyone, but I think it's going to be really important that we find a way to make sure that everyone that is willing has the opportunity to serve in some capacity. Everyone can't be appointed to something, everyone can't be elected to something, but everyone can serve in some capacity. And Erie will be as good as we as Erie make it. And so I just want to be an example of that. I want to continue to do whatever I can, even after 2019. I'm Erie all the way through, born and raised. And so again, I'm honored to serve this year, look forward to working with everyone. And I would truly have to say the best is yet to come. And I'm glad to be a part of that. And I hope that everyone in this room and so many outside of this room will be a part of that change that we all want to see. We have to be it before we can see it. All right, so thank you very much. I look forward to 2019. It's good. Was that 3.5 minutes? 3.5? And let me say this, I want to thank my father, Bishop Curtis Jones Sr., and my mother, Pastor Vicki Jones, the parents of 14 children, of which I'm the oldest. You know, I always tell the joke that, you know, they got such a good product the first time, Liz. They tried to get the same greatness over and over. They got to the baby girl and said, well, it ain't going to get no better than the first, so we'll just stop right here. But my brothers, some of my brothers and sisters, stop it.
Madam President.
Stop it. I do want to honor my family, though. Some of my brothers and sisters are here, some nieces and nephews, and I just love you all very much, and thank you. My best friend, who we've served and shared bottles with, literally been together all our lives, Hayes Moses, and a good friend of mine, and a great part of our ministry, Light Center Ministries. Jen, thank you for being here and supporting and helping, and just wanted to just kind of acknowledge those folks. And Freda, I would look forward to working with you some more too, and thanks for the shout out earlier. I didn't hear it. Thank you though.
And that'll take us to committee reports, Madam President.
We're going to start with Liz.
Okay, it's not too long. I attended the Sewer Authority meeting on December 18th, and I got acquainted with John Savelli, who has been appointed to replace Dan Susi on the authority, and I know that John will do a good job. Kathy Schaff and I attended the legislative update of the Erie Community Foundation on Tuesday night and learned about the foundation's 5-year, $30 million plan for high-impact investing. It was very impressive. I'm waiting to learn if the local groups that commissioned the Urban Land Institute report will, with recommendations for downtown Erie, will be making that report public. Kathy Schaff and I were among more than 100 local people who took time out of our busy schedules to sit for interviews with the ULI panel, and they were here in August. And the short draft report was shared with the public, and I hope the same will be done with the final report. In reference to the McAllister building, Kaz and I attended the Port Authority meeting and spoke out about the need to, I actually asked the port to have a 30-day delay before proceeding with demolition. My request fell on deaf ears. I did ask for a roll call vote, and it was unanimous to go ahead with demolition. I asked for the engineering report, got a copy of that on Monday, and I've been looking through the executive summary. In part because of what's happening with the McAllister building, Kathy and I with Kaz Kwiatkowski are going to be working on a resolution to create a historic preservation task force, and I think we might be ready to present that in early January. And I also went to it's kind of interesting to go from trying to preserve historic buildings to the blighted property review task force. I'm on that, and I attended that meeting. Thank you.
Yes.
We attended the airport meeting this afternoon. A lot of great things are happening there, but we expect a lot more. They have the new flight schedule out with the flights to Chicago and Charlotte and the elimination of the Philadelphia flights. There's some improvements going to happen inside the terminal and outside, and the airport continues to be a progress in motion, and let's hope they keep going. Parking Authority, I met with them last week. The modernization project is going well, and they also have some issues on their own maintenance, which they're taking care of. I think I met Liz at the Bayfront Parkway Improvement Open House also. Yeah. That was an interesting, concept there, and we all had our chance to vote, and I hope the public did, one way or the other, how you feel about it. And finally, a little bit about the McAllister project. I agree with Liz. As a young man who watched him tear down much of downtown when I was a young man, it was sad to watch the Shays, the Colonial, almost the Warner, numerous other buildings going down. The Richford Hotel, not the Richford, but the Lawrence Hotel, which could have been renovated. I've seen them in other towns, such as Peoria with the Hotel de Soto or LaSalle, I think it is. But we're in a hurry to tear down things in this town, much too fast. And I think a 30-day cooling off period, as was proposed by one of my colleagues in the past, David Brennan, wouldn't do a lot of harm. And a building like McAllister, we already made up our mind we're going to tear it down. 30 days would have given somebody a chance. I read Mr. Vanko's letter. Maybe there was someone out there at the last minute. We don't know. It's a moot point now. But I think looking forward, we need to analyze what kind of community we want. If you go to Lancaster, they pride themselves in, you're eating a meal in sometimes 100-year-old building. And yet they found a way to save them. And what do? We tear them down. And yet, we almost did the same thing with Academy, with a few other schools. And I just think it's something we got to look at. And finally, my last comment on the budget tonight. This was one of the toughest decisions I ever had to make. And next year is going to be a little different. I'm not going to be as easy to acquiesce. People are going to have to understand around here that changes have to be made. There's going to be some sacrifices, and everybody's going to have to share in them. It's a little hard to tell homeowners that we're going to punish them, and tonight we punished workers in the city, and yet a lot of workers who gain a nice income working in the city, both in government and the private sector, are leaving here with intact paychecks and won't feel the pain that the people that reside here will. I just think it's a long time that things are going to have to turn around. Until the great metamorphosis comes, where we get people developing in Erie and living in Erie, there's going to be some tough decisions. And I think next year we're going to be tested just as bad. I hope not, but I have to prepare for that just in case. It's not pleasant voting on one-time issues and solutions. So next year, I hope I have the support of my council members. I know Liz and I talked about we're going to put on the golf course, and I'm going to put on many of those revenue enhancers that I think will be shared by all those who use the city assets. I don't think anybody's exempt anymore. We cannot be given, like my ex-councilman Curtis Jones said one time, we give away too much in the city.
He's current now.
He's current now, but well, you're sitting down there, Curtis, and not up here, so. So, getting back to those days, I think the time is done when we give things away for nothing around here. And I think people are going to have to share and help out, and that means a concerted effort by the administration to work on the pilots and everything else. Nothing is exempt anymore. And Mr. Betza, you're going to be real busy this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll start with the holiday refuse. If you live in the city of Erie, there are some changes to trash pickup. I'm reading this off of Erie News Now. For the holiday season, there will be a 1-day delay for the week of Christmas and New Year's for Monday through Thursday customers. No changes to pickup for Sunday customers, okay? I had over 30 people respond to me for the Blighted Property Review Committee, and I had put that on the back burner due to the budget and going over all of the 3 questions that the council people who wanted to be on council. And so it was very busy time. I am in the process of making that decision shortly. Thank you to all the people who definitely showed their interest in wanting to help. So I thank you for the time and spent to contact me. Curtis, I welcome you on City Council, and I am looking forward to working with you. I spent at least a year there watching you up here, and I'm looking forward to working with you this year. Just like I love to go to weddings to renew my marital vows, you renewed my spirit at the end of our meeting here by listening to your affirmation and your hope that you're going to bring for the city, because as you know, you listen to the people up here, it gets discouraging at times. So thank you for the renewal of spirit. There is hope. The people really need to listen to Mayor Schember's mayoral addresses on Thursday mornings. I don't think you're having one tomorrow, but when you go to those meetings or you listen to them live on Facebook, there are a lot of things happening, and there are a lot of people who are getting help with grants and monies, and there's a lot of small entrepreneurs coming into Erie, and a whole year of those have brought hope to me. So McAllister Building, I am also wanting it to be saved, just like I wanted the McBride Viaduct to be saved. And there's going to be a small hole in my heart when I walk past it, because I spend a lot of time down at Dobbins Landing. So I'm looking forward to the task force that will be created to stop any further demolitions in the city of Erie. So I'm more of a people person than I am a budget person, and the budget really took a lot out of me. But yesterday, after the council had voted in Curtis, I was walking to my car at Perry Square, and I talked to two individuals. And I like to listen to the homeless people, and they are people just like you and me. And the best gift that you can give anyone this holiday season is the gift of your presence. And probably against some people's better judgment, we got in my car and I drove him up to the refuge place, the upper room. So that's where he was spending the night, and we just spent some time talking in the car. And that's just the type of person I am. I'm listening to you. So I want to wish you all a happy holiday. Thank you.
Good evening once again, everyone. I also did attend the Port Authority's meeting this past week, and I was one of the council people, or one of the folks there that was in support of the demolition, and not because that I'm not in support of even an ordinance for us to come together on as council to delay some of the historical buildings or sites in the city, but this one is a little different to the fact that this has been going on. It started in '95 when the port purchased it, and it was put in front of council in 2006 that, you know, we want to try to redevelop it, try to do something with this, and get council's approval, which we were approval of. I was not on council then, actually, probably none of the colleagues here were on council at that time. But Over the years, there was a lot of potential buyers, developers, somebody who wanted to do something with a property, but it never came to fruition. It would cost too much money. And over the years, the place just deteriorated more and more and more. And it's to the point now, 18 years later, 95, 2005, 23 years later, that the place would cost more to try to redevelop what's there than it would be to knock it down and possibly rebuild something. So between the engineer's report, which I did get also, it's just not a safe building, it's not feasible. So that was the only reason I spoke to demolish it. Maybe after this place is gone, and maybe in a perfect world, we'll get a new developer in there, something will be down there, and they'll have the acoustics of the old McAllister building, but that's where I stand with that. But once again, understand I do support some type of ordinance that's realistic, that, you know, doesn't, if somebody owns something, they still should have the choice what they want to do with it, but if we can get a waiting period in case something would happen, I'm all for that. I think there was a TV show, Welcome Back, Kotter. Well, we'll go with Welcome Back, Curtis. Good to have you back. Look for a very, very productive year. You're familiar with a lot of the ins and outs of City Hall as well as this council, but yes, we are faced with some very tough decisions, some maybe not so tough decisions, but we look forward to your input and your help to, along with my colleagues, to have a great productive year. I also want to thank all the other candidates that did apply. It's great to see that many interested people in our city. To my colleagues around council, I don't know, we've been getting together a lot in the last 5-6 weeks. Nothing against nobody. Merry Christmas. Thanks. I won't have to see you for maybe a week or two, but it has been a pleasure working with you guys, trying to go through a tough budget with the administration to come to an agreement to move on and to continue to keep working together. To everybody else, Merry Christmas and enjoy the season. Thank you.
You know, it's sad to sit up here and hear our citizens say that we don't care. One thing you all need to understand is that whatever affects you affects us. We have a lot of things going on, and this was a very tough budget. It could have hit you in the pockets worse than what it did if we hadn't compromised with the mayor. But we also have to understand our new mayor walked into this. And we're not always going to agree with each other, but we got to learn how to agree to disagree. And for people to say that we don't care, this is why we ran for office, because we care. When you run for office, you come in thinking, well, okay, I'm coming up there, I'm going to make a difference. But it takes more than one vote. We all got different ideals, different personalities on how we want things to run. But at the end of the day, it's all about our citizens, because we live in the city of Erie too. And as far as the viaduct, I live on the east side, born and raised my children, raising my grandchildren. I live by the viaduct. I fought for the viaducts, but we couldn't get the votes. If we had got the votes, then it would have still been standing. But we tried. We tried all we could. We could not get the votes. And it saddens me to see the viaduct getting torn down, because it's a safety hazard. I agree with everybody. But at the same time, please don't say that we don't care, because we do care. Because when your taxes go up, my taxes go up. All of our taxes go up. The ones that live in the city of Erie. We're doing the best that we can do with what we got. and there are some tough decisions to be made, and I think we did pretty good compromising with the mayor on the budget. So I'm looking forward, congratulations, Mr. Jones. I'm looking forward to you coming in 2019. Hey, or maybe our 2020 budget will be right on point, you know, because now we're going to learn from this budget going into our next budget. Like my colleague said, we're going to start early. We're going to work more with the mayor's office on this budget. But at the end of the day, please don't say I don't care, because I do care. I give up my time with my family to come in here and do all that I can, not just me, but my colleagues, to make the city of Erie a better place to live. And with that said, I want to thank all of our applicants who came out for the position for the open city council seat. Hey, next time there's an election, when there's a seat, come out then. Come out then and run. But I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I love my Erie community. I love each and every one of you. And with that said, Teresa, do you have anything?
I don't have any report other than happy holidays to everyone.
Mayor?
Not a report. Thank you. How about a quick one? Is that okay? Real quick. One thing I wanted to make sure everyone knows is the early intervention program. We're moving forward on that. We've been working on that a couple months. That's a state-funded program that's going to really analyze all of our operations and make sure we're as efficient as we can. They're going to recommend cuts in certain areas. We're going to present all that to you and certainly consider it all very quickly. We're interviewing 3 consultants tomorrow, and 2 tomorrow and 1 on Friday. And we choose from them. All 3 come highly recommended from the state. I was at Piper Burley earlier today for a PAL meeting, the Police Athletic League, with their 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, I think, and it was really a moving experience to see the policemen, the sheriffs, deputies, all there working with these young, it was a very mixed group as well. It was just wonderful to see, and we're going to continue that kind of work with the Police Athletic League. Also, on Monday, I had the chance to go to the dedication of the playground at Wayne Park across from East Middle School, which is a beautiful playground. If you haven't seen it yet, it's incredible. It's great, and obviously that's on the east side, right across from East Middle School. We had our last People's Supper last week. Our last lunch with the mayor last week, and we're going to continue to do that in the year ahead. Any citizens can sign up for that, and they're great conversations. I really enjoy them and encourage people to sign up next year. Also attended a naturalization ceremony back on Friday, December the 7th, where we inducted 50 new Americans from 18 different countries, and it was wonderful. Is that 5 minutes already? Wow.
How about that? Sorry about that.
That's okay. I did want to mention briefly the People's Supper. That process is going to be a 6-month process, which will really help us integrate the community and hopefully help everyone feel valued. It's going to be pretty extensive. We're real excited about how that's going to help us with our issue of diversity and trying to get the entire community to value the rich diversity that we do have. And I think I already encouraged people to sign up for the brown bag lunch for the mayor. I just, again, as everyone else has done, I want to wish everyone a happy holidays. Enjoy it, and I look forward to working with all of you here in council next year. Thank you. Curtis Jones, welcome. Good to have you back.
But 1 second. Can you do me a favor? Can you please explain the process of our appointment that we made yesterday? Because, I mean, people think we just pulled this out of the air.
No, I can. Council has to ultimately select. There were 50 or 51. My understanding is one was not a resident, so you have 50. You have to narrow it down. There's no rules or regulations of how you do that. And so what this council did was each put in 5 names, as I understand, for people to be interviewed. There's some overlap, so potentially you could have had 35 people that you would have picked, but you picked it and it went down to, well, I'm sorry, 30. You're right. Mr. Mirsky wouldn't have a say. But you could have 30. Here there was enough overlap. You're down to 20 or 19. 18 ultimately come for an interview. you interview them. Ultimately, council has to vote, and you have to vote publicly who you're going to select. It's a learning process of what the best way to do it is. I know some people have been critical of the process. I'm open for any type of improvement that you can instill, but at the end of the day, you have to vote for one candidate. You have to do it at a public meeting. You have to do it open. You've done that, so you've complied with the law. The question is, how do you make people feel that they've been included and welcome? And that's, you've done it one way. Other cities, other councils do it slightly different. I'm not sure that I've ever seen the perfect way to do it, but I will credit you. I don't think I've ever seen in my years where a council actually interviews 18 candidates. That's significant, that's extensive, and I certainly appreciate that. But you just have to ultimately vote, and you've done that. And so from a legal perspective, what you've done is lawful.
I will point out that I wrote an editorial the last time somebody was picked in which the editorial said that it did violate the Sunshine Act by not attributing who voted for whom. And I have asked the Pennsylvania Freedom of Information Coalition and the Open Records Office about the fact that the rules were changed at the last minute so that people could vote for could cast 6 votes for one person. I don't think that that was the right way to go. I think the votes should have we should have acknowledged who we voted for, if not by the letter of the law, the spirit of the law. The first ballot, we should have said, I'm voting for XXX, and that did not happen. So I'm going to continue to press that.
And I'm not here to defend the process. I mean, if you have 6 votes and each person can cast 6, to say that, can I do it for 1, can I do it for 2, or am I required to do it for 6? It's up to the group of how you do it.
But the group did not decide. The group did not decide. That's the point.
And I mean, I don't want to debate you. I mean, we
But I think what people got to realize, I don't think it was just, this was the same.
No, it wasn't.
Can I finish? This was the same format as the last council appointment. Ms.
Funny
Clerk?
that we didn't get it then. When I asked for
I
that,
was sitting there with you. I didn't know we could do 6 at one either.
I asked for an email from the city clerk, which we got on November 7th, and it did not have that last sentence on there. So I'm done talking about this, but if this happens again, I will call to attention what happened.
I'd like to ask Mr. Betza if you could follow up yourself to make sure the way we did it this past time was the way it was done in the past.
Well, and I guess I don't know.
I don't think you change the rules for every time you make an appointment. I think this is
if we're not happy with the way that it's done, if anyone is not happy, then we can have a discussion, because there will be another opening. It's going to happen. There are vacancies that occur. And so when we have that vacancy, we can all be in agreement of how we do it. There is no clear rule. You decide what you want. And so we should probably start and have discussions, candid discussions about how you want it to go. As long as you vote at a public meeting of who you want to pick, if there's a motion, a second, and you get a majority vote, that's it. That's all the law requires. So how you ultimately pick your pool, how many interviews you do, how many questions you do, if you do questions, all of that is up to the group. And I think it would be very helpful, because I could sense there's some disagreement, that there should be ultimately this council should pick the way it wants to replace future people. And we can always have that written policy, and that can always be available, because apparently it wasn't available and everyone didn't see it. I wanted to say 3 things really quick. Number 1, we talked about earned income tax. Earned income tax increase, and Mr. Kwiatkowski talked about sharing it with non-residents. And just so we're clear, many of you I think know this, currently the law does not allow that for the city of Erie to do this year. It is not allowed. And so that, when I hear that, it's like, yeah, that makes great sense to me. That was not an option before this council. The second thing, Mr. Koppel, one of the residents, spoke about the idea of parking tickets, and a great way to collect is prevent you from getting a new registration or take away your license. And he used an example of when he was in an accident. Under Pennsylvania law, if you're in an accident and the person doesn't have car insurance and they don't pay, you could take their license away. That's what apparently he did. We don't have that ability with parking tickets. State law does not allow that. Should they? I would argue pretty passionately they should. But that would require a change at the state level. That does not exist. That is not I love the idea, but it's not an avenue that's available for us. The last thing I wanted to just tell you is that we've had several mentions about the school district declaring an intersection or an area to be unsafe. The school district is not in the habit of declaring areas to be unsafe. What the school district has done, and I think it's unique and I think it's very helpful to citizens, is if no matter where you are, no matter what the situation is, if you don't like the transportation, or you don't like the intersection you have to cross or the area you have to walk, they will provide bus passes across the board. So everyone if they feel unsafe, regardless of where they are, or regardless of what anyone else thinks about their belief, if they're sincere and they say, I don't want my child walking here, the school district has been very gracious to allow bus passes for anyone. They have not denied a bus pass. So I wanted to just share those with you. Thank you, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Rose, would you like to say anything?
Merry Christmas.
Okay, that adjourns our city council meeting.
City Council adjourns at 9:35 p.m. Mrs. Arrington, Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Winowski.